Today is the day. We're getting some hard facts that are going to maybe help the defense's case and hurt the defense's case. So let's hop right in because I can't wait any longer. Just kidding. If you're new here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel. I like to upload every single day that this court case is going on. So I hope you guys are going to be watching and returning every single day. Now, we just got some testimony from another doctor. I could have included the testimony, but it was really easy to just break this down and be concise, so I'm gonna help you guys out. This doctor was from the Jersey Shore Medical Hospital, and he actually saw Corey multiple times throughout the day. Now, he says that there was no infection. He said that Corey was fine other than some bruising, meaning that when Corey was handed over to the father, he was in good condition and Corey should not have died. They checked his lungs, they checked pretty much everything on Corey, and Corey was just a regular kid. They even did bone surveys. They tested to see if he was abused. They said that he really wasn't being abused. They didn't see any signs, but the big thing was that Corey wasn't fighting an infection, and the defense is saying that he had sepsis, but with the white blood counts, the white blood cell counts and the red blood cell counts, you would see that he's fighting an infection. And Corey was in pretty good spirits. He was just only a little bit dehydrated. So they're saying that Corey couldn't have had sepsis and that Corey was completely okay. Now let's continue with the case.
So calling your attention to April 2nd of 2021 at approximately 3:48 p.m. was a patient brought to the emergency room named Corey Mitchell.
Yes.
And can you tell the court who brought Corey into the emergency room?
GREGOR.
And ultimately, did you learn the relationship of GREGOR and Corey?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what the relationship was?
GREGOR is Corey's father, and Corey is Chris's son.
And where were you when you first saw Mr. GREGOR and Corey?
I was in the waiting room. I was speaking to another patient at the time. I'm right near the door, speaking to another patient. I did not hear any commotion. I did not hear any urgent sound that would redirect my attention. A registrar came up to me and said, "Bill, you have to look at this." So I went over to Corey, and he was in the arms of Chris at the waiting room entrance, or just past the waiting room entrance near the desk.
Now, the first time that you observed the defendant with Corey, can you explain to the jurors the position of Corey in relation to the defendant?
Corey was over. Corey was in Chris's arms. His arms were over Chris's shoulders. His legs were dangling. His arms did not look like they had much movement to them. His legs did not look like they had much movement to him. His head was rested on Chris's shoulder. His face was difficult to visualize. So when I first approached them, I knew that something was concerning, but I couldn't see everything I needed to see. So I was depending on Chris to convey a sense of urgency or unwellness that I did not get from him at first. It was more of a clinical description of what was going on, and I did not immediately feel I had to rush them back. I definitely knew it was concerning, but I needed just a little more information. If I saw Corey's face right away, it would have been much easier. But Corey's face was on Chris's shoulder.
So the first time that you made this observation, that would be the two of them would have been in the lobby area.
Yes.
And did you approach the defendant in the lobby area of the emergency room?
Yes.
And what immediate observations were you able to make of Corey in the lobby area?
So I went over to them, and I was splitting my attention between Chris and Corey. What I could tell was that there wasn't a lot of spontaneous movement from Corey. He was not really moving on his own. He appeared to have lack of tone to his muscles, and there was a lot of support coming from Chris in keeping him in the position that he was in.
Did you speak to the defendant in the lobby area of the emergency room?
Yes.
And would this be a practice or a common practice to engage in something like that?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what the defendant said?
Chris told me that he introduced himself, who he was the father, his son, and he told me that this was around 3, nearly 4 p.m. He told me that earlier in the day, around 9 a.m., his son was dropped off to him, was with his mother the night before. He did tell me that the patient was at Jersey Shore University Hospital and had a workup and was discharged. And just a side note, once you hear that, less than 12 hours later, you kind of go, okay, like maybe he's not that sick. So, I need more information. So talk more. So Chris told me that earlier that morning, he was appeared loopy, very drowsy, and he put him to bed. And later in the afternoon, Corey was continued to be loopy and drowsy. And when all that time passed, and he was still fatigued and not himself. That's when he brought him into the ER. So that's what he told me.
After you made your initial observations and you spoke to the defendant, can you tell the jurors what you did next regarding Corey's care?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
I said after you made your observations in the lobby and spoke to the defendant, what did you do next regarding Corey's care?
I continued the history taking, which is pretty standard as a triage nurse to get history from the patient. I would have spoken to Corey, but he was not in a place to speak. He was not making any sound hardly. I continued my brief conversation with Chris until there was a moment when Corey tilted his head back, and that's when I got what I needed to see to really kick up the speed on this emergency.
So where was Corey taken at that point?
He was taken to the emergency room. Once I saw that, then I rushed it. So I called. His eyes went back to his head. He didn't look well. He was pale. I called the charge nurse immediately after that, and then I got a room. And being that Chris was holding him well, I didn't waste time getting a stretcher or a wheelchair. I said, "Hey, you okay to go to the ER?" He goes, "Yes," and we went to the ER, room 6, the emergency room.
What room did you go to in the emergency room?
Room 6.
And while you were in room 6 of the emergency room, can you tell the jurors who else came into that room?
So, but I already alerted help. So they were waiting for me in that room. Was various emergency nurses and our ER physician and patient care tech.
And what, if anything, did the defendant say while you were in room 6?
At that time, now that as a triage nurse, my role was to get the patient to help. So at that time, I focused more on Corey than the conversation with Chris. But that's because that our ER physician was speaking with Chris, getting essentially what I just got from Chris. He basically reiterated the story, how he was loopy and tired all day, and how he felt concerned that he didn't kind of shake out of that. So he brought him into the emergency room. He told him about the Jersey Shore hospital visit the night before, but it was more. I was working on Corey at the time.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you do regarding the treatment of Corey?
So we placed him on the heart monitor. Before that, we took off his clothes. That's when I noticed the bruise on his chest, and we still had to act quickly. So we put the heart monitor on him. I got an IV, drew blood from him, while the rest of the team was doing their various roles, including our physician who was talking to Chris.
What was the defendant's demeanor while you were in room 6?
While we were in room 6 was similar to when I first interacted with him in the waiting room. It was a just, I would say it was a clinical aspect in that he was describing what was going on without much more difference than anyone else would, regardless of their role with the person. So he was conveying the information, but there wasn't much more than that.
And after you drew blood from Corey, where did you go after that?
Well, Corey required a lot of attention, so we still had an emergency room to run. So I told the charge nurse, "I'll take the charge phone, which handles the ambulances. You focus on this." So I handled the charge nurse and the triage phone, and I went to various things throughout the ER while everyone worked on Corey. He was like an all hands on deck type of situation.
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
He was an all hands on deck type of situation.
There we go. We finally find out some more facts about what happened the day that Corey went to the hospital. Now, Corey went into the hospital and he was already showing signs that he had no control over his body anymore. He was limp basically in his father's arms. And the nurses felt like he needed to go to the emergency room. So he went immediately and the father stayed and waited. Now we see that GREGOR was still there, so he didn't run immediately. A lot of people think that he fled immediately as soon as he gave Corey off to the hospital workers, but no, he didn't. He was still there, and apparently he was acting like any other parent. But remember, they said at Jersey Shore Medical that he had no infections and no issues. So how did Corey get this sick and this hurt in that 1 day period? Because they're saying that he was completely fine a day ago. So this is really interesting. Let's hop into the next clip.
Now, in regard to the video that we just viewed, did you observe the defendant coming into the hospital lobby area?
In the video?
Not in the video, but from where you were located at the time in the hospital.
The day of, I did not see him until he was already in the waiting room.
Okay. And I'm now going to approach with S48E. And you recognize it?
Yes.
And can you tell us what that is?
It was a CD.
And what is contained on that CD?
A video of hospital security footage from that day, April 2nd.
Okay, and you reviewed the contents of this.
Yes.
And this is a following video from the video that we just saw, being S48A.
Yes.
And are you depicted in this video?
I am.
And are you familiar with the location of the video?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to move into evidence and publish?
Any objection? Seeing no, this 48B.
Thank you. Now, is that you depicted in that video?
Yes.
And does that video accurately depict your conversation you had with the defendant on that day?
Yes.
And do you see the person you spoke to that day on that video?
Yes.
And what would that person's name be?
Chris GREGOR.
And do you also see Corey on that video?
Yes.
I'm now going to show what's been marked S48C. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what that is, please?
That is a CD which contains video of possible security footage from that day, April 2nd.
And is that another surveillance video following the previous video, which was moving?
Yes.
And you're familiar with that video?
Yes.
And you've seen it before you come to court today?
Yes.
And you're actually depicted in this video?
I am.
Your Honor, permission to move into evidence S48C and publish?
S48C and evidence.
Now, is that you depicted in that video?
Yes. Yeah.
And is that Christopher GREGOR depicted in that video?
Yes.
And is that Corey depicted in the video?
Yes.
And does that accurately depict you taking Corey into room 6 of the emergency room at the hospital? No other questions, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, guys, just like we thought, Corey really wasn't moving. As you see, Chris GREGOR tries to put him on the ground, and he's like leaning up against Chris GREGOR. Like, Chris had to pretty much hold him up. You see, Chris is not standing straight up when he's talking to the nurse or the hospital worker. He's holding Corey up, and you know, he's acting frantic. And that's why the nurse said he was acting like any other parent, because he was in there frantic. He was, you know, rushing with them. The hospital workers were rushing. Everybody pretty much got hands on deck. So we saw exactly what the nurse described before.
Any other involvement did you have in this investigation?
We wrapped up after that, and then the next morning, which would be later in the morning for after the search in Englishtown, the autopsy was conducted at 9 a.m. on Saturday the 3rd.
April 3rd?
April 3rd.
Okay. And did you go to that?
Yes.
And when you went, where was that located?
Community Medical Center in Tom's River.
And when you got there, was anybody else there, or did you go with anyone else?
There were 2 detectives from my unit, Detective Daniel Lesnikowski and Detective Ralph Laudicina, as well as Detective Purcell from Barnegat Township Police Department, Detective Dennis Mitchell, Detective Joe Mitchell, Sergeant John Carroll, and Lieutenant Brian Haggerty of the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office.
Now, while you were there, what was your understanding of what your role was?
So our role in the autopsy is we basically work hand in hand with the medical examiner, which was who does the autopsy, and we do all the photographs and collection of any evidence from that autopsy.
Were photographs taken?
Yes.
Who took the photographs?
Detective Lesnikowski.
And were you in his presence while he was taking them?
Yes.
And who directed him to take the photographs that he took?
We have a set of standard photographs we take on every autopsy, then everything else after that is done at the direction of the medical examiner, pathologist conducting the examination.
Judge, may we approach that so I could show the court the pictures first?
Sure.
Thank you. That when you go to the autopsy, your purpose there, part of that is to take photographs, right?
Correct.
I think you had said that some of them are standard and some of them are at the direction of the medical examiner.
Correct.
Okay. When you first get to the autopsy before you begin your pictures, could you tell me what happened?
So
what happened in this one?
So the deceased is transported from the location of incident, which in this case was Southern Ocean Medical Center. We seal the body bag. Every body bag is identified and sealed. The decedent's information. It also is the seal numbers placed on the bag, and also in very large letters, do not open. So that bag is basically now treated as evidence from Southern Ocean Medical Center to Community Medical Center. We have a funeral home. We have funeral homes on contract that transport for us. So in this case, he was transported to Community Medical Center, where he is then placed under the care of their security and morgue, where he's signed in, kept in the morgue, and remains there until we arrive for the autopsy the next day.
And when you arrived for the autopsy the next day, what was the procedure initially?
So the initial procedure is the bag is brought into the examination room, placed on a table, and we then rephoto that bag as we last left it, which would be sealed and marked. We then rephoto all that again, and then the bag is then unsealed by the medical examiner's personnel to begin the examination.
Okay. And was there a name and markings contained on that bag?
Yes.
Okay. What were those, if you could tell me?
It would be the name Corey Mitchell and his date of birth, social security number, the bag time, who bagged it, and the seal number.
And all those things were present on there when you arrived at the autopsy.
Yes.
And were they the same or substantially similar to the hospital the night before?
Yes.
Now, after you photograph the bag in that condition, what is the next part of the procedure, generally speaking?
So the next part of the procedure is we open the bag. That seal is broken. As I said, once the doctor's ready to begin the examination, the bag is unzipped, and we do a overall photography and examination of the body as the way it was, because this is now the first time the pathologist is viewing the body.
So some of the photographs are taken then at the onset before the autopsy begins.
Correct.
Okay. Are there more photographs taken after those initial ones?
So the first one would be as he was. The second set would then be after all the medical equipment, clothing, and any jewelry or anything else is removed.
Is there another set that's taken after that?
Then after that, we do the posterior of the body, and then that is when the examination begins. And the doctor then pretty much runs the show from there and what pictures are taken.
Okay. And then do you take pictures during the actual examination?
Yes.
There we have it. We had another person that was explaining the autopsy, and basically he just explains the process that they go through so that they make sure that the autopsy hasn't, or the body should I say, hasn't been tampered with, and that everything just is smooth. And they also explained how Corey's body was in the end. Corey definitely went out the trooper because he had extensive damage to his body from the life-saving technique. But that's pretty much the end of day 3. Not too much happened today, but we did get some hard-hitting facts that definitely skewed how I thought about this case. I was probably leaning one way, but now I'm leaning towards a more unbiased perspective. So let's see what happens. Let's see the more crosses, and let's also just get some more facts on this issue. But I'm BippyMan, and I hope you guys have a good time and a good day. Peace. Bippy.
Bet your sweet Bippy I did.